Clash at Demonhead. Can a one-man engine of destruction prevent mankind's extinction? And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
And I'm Joe.
Guys, who has the better title? The Terminator or the Engine of Destruction?
I'm going to say the Terminator. It's more succinct.
Yeah.
One word to describe what you do, you know?
Engine of Destruction sounds like you're trying too hard to have like a really intimidating name.
Engine of Destruction sounds like a part inside the Terminator's robotic body. You know, like, oh, now we got to install the Engine of Destruction.
That's true, yeah.
And this is not what I expect an Engine of Destruction to look like, because there's just some weird design, maybe musings on my own behalf that I had when I look at the box art and then the game, like, graphics, and then the, like, anime style, in the menu when you pause, there's like an anime rendition of the Engine of Destruction, otherwise known as Billy Big Bang Blitz. He has like three different kinds of looks here. He's got the one on the back of the box that makes him look pretty fierce. Then in the game, I don't know, he's got like he looks kind of like a Super Mario Brothers cutesy style character. And then when you pause, you get like this beautiful like portrait headshot and pixel art of him. So not really sure which art style I'm supposed to interpret as. Am I supposed to imagine the box art the entire time I'm playing the game, or am I supposed to feel like I'm more like in a cute, silly world like Super Mario Brothers?
I'm gonna go with the sort of close up during dialogue, and when you pause, like that's the canon look. And you know, when you zoom out and you're playing the actual game, like that's just the closest they could get to make it look correct. And the other thing was probably just they hired a box art guy, and he's like, we're trying to make a game with a guy that looks like this, and had never seen what they were actually trying to make. Yeah, and you get Fabio like that. So I think that's what's going on.
I felt that the sprite, to the best of most games, like nicely represented what I imagined. Like I can easily imagine that sprite as the guy in the pause menu, or like the pixel art version.
Yeah.
I didn't even see the box art, so I don't know.
It's pretty out there.
I figured as such.
And are you allowed to have two nicknames? Are you allowed to be Billy Big Bang Blitz and also the Engine of Destruction?
See, that's also a thing. Like, that's what's actually on the back of the box?
Yeah.
Because I didn't finish this game, but I don't
ever think he's referred to it as such.
I think whoever designed the box, both the ad copy and the art, like they never played the game.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, I also think that you are allowed to have two nicknames, but if they do not go together at all, such as Billy Big Bang, what is it? Billy Big Bang
Blitz.
What?
I think Blitz is his last name. So Big Bang.
Billy Big Bang Blitz. That's just like fun and like, he's a crazy out there guy, and then the Engine of Destruction. I think they need to be a little more cohesive than that.
Well, those are just like the two, like, he's kind of bipolar. He's got a couple different moods, so he'll either be
big, don't make him angry.
Big Bane, and he's cool and fun, and then Engine of Destruction is after he's had a few too many whiskeys, and maybe his girlfriend Amy or whatever his name, like that she won't like listen to him. Any kind of different combination of things.
Fair enough.
So in the game, you control Billy Big Bang Blitz. I swear, it's not even like they don't make a big deal out of it. So I'm gonna stop making a big deal.
He's
out
Bang.
of it. I just think it's funny. I just like that. Yeah, he is Bang. Who is you can basically you're playing a platforming adventure RPG crossover style game where even though it seems like it's a platforming game first and foremost, there are branching paths of over 40 routes that the player can take in the game, And the reason where the adventure part comes in is because throughout these routes, you'll find and talk to either NPCs or you'll find a shop or another location that like leads to a secret location to another place. All these things can be found on the routes, but you have to traverse these routes through the platforming stages. So the game is kind of non-linear, and you don't necessarily gain experience points, but you develop your inventory as you continue to play the game, visit shops, and acquire specific power-ups that you need later on in the game. You can choose any which way to start or to go, and you're allowed to backtrack to visit stages you've already seen. So I feel like if we really want to talk about this game, we kind of have to like divide it up into sections, or maybe that's just a fun, neat way for me to get you guys to be more coherent. But I feel like if we start talking about it as a platformer, then as an adventure game, and last as an RPG, we'll cover more ground that way.
I don't need you to make me more coherent, Mike.
Well, you sound a little, enraged by that, so maybe I'm...
Like, I don't even understand what you're saying right now.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we should just move on and talk about the platforming of this game.
Yeah, whatever you want.
Yeah, well, it's the main hook, right? So you're entering these levels, and you choose your path. Most times you're given like 2 options, but sometimes you're even given as many as 3. You choose your path based on the number that it provides you. Like, going left is number 5. We're gonna call it stage 5 or whatever. And then those levels are like half Mega Man, half. Yeah, I think actually mostly like Mega Man style with a little bit of like that Castlevania 2 sense of like you can explore and talk to people too sometimes. You're doing all that, but they're short little bursts of levels. They're not like full stages. So when we say 40 stages, it's not like each stage is a 5-minute endeavor and you must visit all stages to complete the game or something like that. So forget about all the branching paths for a minute and all the other things you can see and do. Just as a platformer, how does Billy Big Bang Blitz perform?
I'll say that at first, not considering all the other stuff, just the way it moves, it did sort of throw me off a little bit. Because there are some weird things that bothered me. And again, I think in order to explain why this got better, you'll understand once we get more to the RPG part. But there were like things where when you jump in the water, you're like already losing health if you go below it. But then things are shooting at you, and the only way to dodge is to go below water. And like there were like weird things like that. There's stuff where like you hit the top of the screen when you jump. So if you're like up high and you try to jump, you bump into the like invisible ceiling of the screen rather than just kind of going up and through a little bit and then coming back down. Like little things like that felt a little jank, and they got better over time, but like that was just my initial impression of the platforming itself. Don't want that to like make anyone think that like I had a bad time the whole time, but at first I was like, what is going on?
Yeah, like at the base level of how Bang performs or just handles, it is very tight. Like you'll have that 1-to-1. There's not a lot of it's not sticky. Like a lot of other platformers, especially early platformers. But his jump is very strange, and just the arc and height of that jump will lead to what Joe was talking about, especially if you're anywhere beyond, like if you're playing anywhere beyond the top half of the screen, you're going to bump your head on the ceiling/sky. And you've got a projectile that you shoot, and you can only have 3 of those on the screen at once. Otherwise, you have to wait for them to kind of depopulate, and that can sometimes cause some issues. But that's also something we've seen before a lot. Just getting into the nitty gritty of that, like there are the one thing that I did like about him in terms of how he controls is he could move and crouch at the same time. That's something that we've complained about a lot in the past. So he's got a lot of tools. He can also climb on walls if it's the right kind of wall. So he's got a lot of tools available to him, but like there are some aspects of it that were a little head scratching.
To that too, I mean, this is one of the games that I guess I made the mistake of assuming it was straightforward enough when I turned it on that I didn't need to read the manual, and I think that also I mean, I'm assuming a lot of this stuff is explained in the manual. I kind of figured it out organically or from watching videos afterwards. But like, I had no idea you can climb walls. I had no idea that there were like platforms you can jump down through. And so I was like, why are all these levels just dead ends? And like, none of that stuff's obviously explained in the game. So I probably should have read the manual first. But I think that also like was stuff I was missing, like all the stuff you could do that I was missing when I first played it, and was like, what is this game? Because I wasn't like noticing all like the other additions like that I didn't know were possible.
There are also levels that are dead ends, though. So that's
true
also...
too. But I don't think I actually discovered those in my initial initial play, pickup of this game, where I was like already hard on it.
And I think going back to your point, Sean, about just how Bang controls and everything, I'd say the base version of Bang, the one you start the game with, is not a great start for this game. The upgrades, which are obviously meant to feel like, rewarding power-ups that you've earned by killing enemies and buying them either at the shop or getting them elsewhere, they're meant to feel like actual improvements. I just think that the base version of Bang, where he just has his standard loadout and just the handgun, it's not that great, and the levels themselves are designed with a bit of like claustrophobia, both because of how the platforming works. So the platforms themselves, you guys were talking about hitting the ceiling, and that's not great either. You should be able to kind of float up there or something at the very least. But the platforms, it's almost it's cave-like in its design sometimes too, and I feel like certain enemies, just the way they're placed and everything, it's a lot of it's not a fast moving game. Sometimes you do have to like shoot from afar, clear out the area, and then go, or sometimes you have to take the hit and and just power through it too, which is not, those aren't great feelings. I think it'd be a lot better if this game was just a little more open. Maybe if the size of everything was just shrink down a little bit, so this way they had more room. I feel like I kept running into that issue with the hitboxes in specific.
Yeah, there's it's not specifically you one-to-one controlling the character, but I think it still falls into the same category, but also your power, your health. The way that it tracks that, you'll get however many little squares of health, and one might intuit that means that you have 3 or 4 hits until you fall. That is not true. Each one is kind of invisibly subdivided into other hits that I think maybe some enemies do more damage than most. I never actually tested that theory, but you will take damage and you don't really know you're taking damage because your power doesn't go down. And especially with how weirdly shaped your hitbox seems to be, you know you're taking damage just because of like that tactile response, but you're not seeing it reflected on your power meter. A lot of this can confuse and just make it not feel perfect.
Yeah, it almost felt like some of those like power, like the different sections in your power meter felt almost like arbitrary. I swear sometimes I would lose the health immediately on first hit, and then other times it would take like 10 hits or something. I mean, maybe it was because maybe that first bar wasn't full and there's just no way of telling that, but like it always looked like sometimes like one hit would kill me, and then other times you would have like
it's hard to get a handle on your relative safety because you're not really sure when that's going to happen. And also to your point earlier, Mike, about I know we're not really talking about upgrades that yet, but a lot of the upgrades we will see when we talk about them are more so like fixing problems with the way the game handles, more so than giving you additional fun stuff. The jetpack, I will say, is just fun and it's not fixing any problems. But like, when it seems that they're more just, oh, I don't have to deal with this annoyance anymore. That seems like poor design in my opinion.
Right. I keep thinking about, some of the best platformers in the Super Mario Brothers games. When you die in that game, or when you have to restart it because there's no save, you have to start all the way back at World 1-1, and it's not really, it's not a chore to then get through those levels again because they're designed in a way that's just kind of fun to play them. Like, I don't think Clash of Demonhead really had that for me as individual stages. The actual journey and adventure part that we'll get to in a second. That's what enhances the game. But if you actually just think about the fact that you have to sometimes visit these stages again, especially if you might have went the wrong way, or now you need to, you hit a dead end and you have to replay. I'm not saying you have to go back and play like 7 levels that you just beat again. I'm not being that extreme, but there is some backtracking in this, and you're just playing these short platforming levels again. I don't think it's more of a slog to then get through them again. There was nothing like these levels maybe could have been more unique or more inspired or easier to get around. So this way backtracking wasn't that big of a deal. I think they could have done more here to increase the feel of exploration.
Yeah, I think that this is where we often have different like tolerances for backtracking. Because you're right. I mean, everything you said, I agree with. Just for me, the levels were short enough that it was like it never was that didn't even really cross my mind, because it always just felt like, oh, okay, I got to go back this way. I'm familiar with this area now, so like that's kind of cool. I know where I'm going. I know where I got to get. Once I was like getting to the point where I'm backtracking a lot. But yeah, I mean, I think it's just it doesn't bother me when there's short bouts of it like that.
And I think it solves its own problem, because if it were like this for the entire game, that would be a big problem. But once you kind of get the power up for teleportation, a lot of that kind of goes by the wayside.
Right. You think about a game like Dragon Quest, where you're constantly going back to the to the main town to report to the king and even save your game there. If each one of those like trips back was like multiple levels that you had to keep traversing to, and you had to have Bang keep going back to like where you started to then like get the next mission or something, that would be a train wreck of a game. So I do agree that the levels are short, and that's enough. It's enough to tolerate them. I guess I can't get over that idea that they could have been a little more unique, even just if it didn't feel like stage 5 and I don't know, then stage 13 or something, because they're not sequential, the numbers on the route. So sometimes you'll be on stage 5 and move over to stage 13. It just felt like I was just doing another version of the same level, rather than like, oh, this is how the route changed and evolved, blah blah blah.
Yeah, and as far as the routes too, and sorry, I just the arbitrary order that we're talking about, and it just happens to be like all the negative things I have to say about the game. I do have good things to say about the game too, but the route, like, it's great that they gave you a map and everything, but without there being numbers on the map, like it seems like such a small thing. But like so many NPCs will say like, oh, go to Route 7 and do this or whatever, and then I look at the map and it's like, okay, it's just a bunch of dots on a page. Like there's like, what are there, like 40 of them? Like I don't remember which one is which.
Well, that's where
like I just wish
I think a lot of our listeners and just people that grew up with these games would tell you that you have to make your own map with your own labels.
Well, I get that, yeah, and that's what I
don't
did,
agree that should be necessary, but
yeah, that's what I did. But it just felt like why the map almost. I mean, the map almost felt arbitrary. I mean, I guess it does, like, you can kind of trace out your path, and when you get to each spot, it shows you like it shows you which direction all of the immediate possible levels you can go to are. So like, for that it helps, but it's like, just feels like such a small thing. If they just made the map something you could look at, it would be like an actual very useful tool, instead of having like have your own map outside. I mean, I've been on both sides of that, like you should draw a map thing in previous games, but for this it's like, well, there is a map. I feel like it wasn't helping me much though.
Yeah,
right. And the map, Joe, that you usually want to draw would be the platforming stages in this game, which don't require a map at all. Like, those are very easy to navigate. It's just navigating yourself around the overworld is the weird part.
You'd want to draw a map of the side-scrolling parts?
Well, I'm not saying in this game you don't need to, but I'm saying in normal games, like, people would tell you, oh, you need a map to make a map of Metroid, right?
Oh.
And it's not like you're making a map where you're just saying like, okay, Criteria's over here and the fire level's down here. It's like, you don't just be as generic as that. Instead, you would be like, here's the entire, like, where's the platforms are, what type of enemies are in here. In this game, you wouldn't do that for the individual stages. You don't need to make those kinds of maps. But this very, like, simplistic branching paths, art of an overworld map that they gave you isn't something, it just needs numbers. That's all. It's not like it's
Yeah.
complicated.
Exactly, yeah. I take it more as like you would draw the map in something like a Zelda dungeon. Like you're making the map out of the levels. This game gives you the map, but without all the information on it. So you just redraw the map that the game gives you, and then I guess just fill in numbers. I guess it could be like a way of like, you're progressing because you're now learning. You're learning which is which, and it's like the
numbers
map is
and
becoming clear to
also
you, but,
like things like, oh, there's X key item here, and now I
Right.
gotta get there. But I agree that it's a very small amount of information to leave out.
At least the numbers don't change every time you start a new game. Wouldn't that be an interesting experience
God.
if you didn't know where you were going to branch off to next? And, stage 14 was always stage 14 that gives you X or does Y, but it leads to a different route. So this time you might have to travel in a completely different direction because you're not sure where that stage that gets you the jetpack is.
You got to redraw that map now.
And last on the platforming side, the bosses. I think they did a good job here with the bosses because it is a bit of just learn the pattern and know where to hit them, and then you can get by. And this also is like locked off again, so I feel like it doesn't have the claustrophobic problems that the rest of the levels had. I have nothing really else to say. I liked them.
Yeah, I think
I thought...
the one I
Go
liked
ahead.
especially was the one that started off really tiny, and then like as the fight progresses, it gets larger. I just thought that was a fun little joke that I feel like they threw in there, and it sort of expresses that this game has a really good sense of humor and just vibe going on.
Yeah, they at least as far as I had gotten, they didn't really get samey. It always felt like it was like, oh, here's a new guy. What's this guy doing? Like they were never like, they're not in my contention of like best designed boss fights ever, but they were. I'd say that they were definitely better than maybe the majority of what we see on the NES when it comes to trying to do a boss battle.
I think it's because they're not easy fights, but they're easy to learn
Exactly
how they fight, and then you just have to play more like defensive and hit regularly, and you'll be fine. I like those. It reminds me almost of Mega Man. It's not the same thing because Mega Man is like you want to go in with the appropriate power up that particular boss needs. It doesn't have that, but it does have the same learn the pattern and hit appropriately style that Mega Man goes.
Yeah, I think that hits the nail on the head because there are just too many games that we've played where it's just like, all right, I'm at the boss battle, he's just throwing a bunch of shit at me, like I gotta run and dodge and try and hit, and it's like, no, these all have like, yeah, something learnable.
Moving into it as an adventure game, we were talking about, the branching paths and the backtracking and stuff like that. Wanted to offer a thought about a game we'll be playing soon, Super Mario Bros. 3, and really Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. When you beat a level in either of those games, you're not forced to replay the level in the overworld to backtrack through the world map. You just now can those levels change color. At least in Super Mario World, they change color to mark that they've been beaten, and then you can walk back to those areas. Do you think that Clash of Demonhead would have benefited at all from that approach? Where
I don't. I think that these are two very different kinds of games. One is an adventure. Like imagine in a Final Fantasy game, you didn't have to fight anything once you went through a place before. Like it's trying to sell a different experience. Mario is a platforming game, and you beat the level. It just happens to have like a level select that makes it look like a world map, even though there really isn't any interplay between those levels in like what an RPG or an adventure game has. So I think that would be weird.
Yeah, I agree with you because I feel like, well, for one, it's hard to even like put my finger on like how to say it exactly. But like Mario is trying to be much more of like this like planned out like twitch reflex type platformer. You got to jump to like every situation you find yourself in is super planned out to be like a difficult platforming challenge. And I'm not saying this game isn't planned out, but like you said, Sean, it's planned for like a different thing. It's trying to make it seem like, no, you're this guy, a real guy. I mean, a real guy as real as a guy with like jet boots or whatever it gets, but like a real guy on an adventure going through like an actual like terrain and fighting things. It's not as much like platforming challenges as it is fighting enemies. So it would be weird if like, I mean, I'm sure that you could just skip over it, but I feel like that is, for better or for worse, like this mountain or whatever it is, path leading up to the mountain of these levels is like the meat and potatoes of the game. So like you beat one thing once, you have to go back and suddenly you're just zipping around the map. I feel like you're cutting out a lot of what the game is, and I can see people criticizing that because like your game might be artificially inflated, but I think it adds some stakes to like going back and whatnot.
Well, to split it the other way, then would the game have benefited at all to take the Simon's Quest, Fazanadu style approach, where you're always in this platforming, side-scrolling style of game, but you never go back to an overworld. You just go to the next area, and it's all seamless.
I think that might have been hard to do. I mean, I guess it would if you really like rethink the way that the game is designed. It might not be so hard, but it would be tough to do the branching paths like that and like this sort of maze of like learning. I gotta go here next. I gotta go there next. I don't know. It's hard for me to envision it like that. Whereas like Faxanadu does what this game does with like the backtracking and going back to an extent. But I feel like the whole point of this game seems to be to like learn the terrain. Not the whole point, but like a major point of this game is like learn the terrain and navigate around, find your power ups, know where things are. I don't know. I'm not saying I don't think it could work. I think that this was like explicitly, it feels like their intent.
Absolutely, yeah. It's trying to do the consequence or reward of your own choice on those branching paths. There's a reason why it's not just a straight line that you move through. So I'm not advocating for either style, Super Mario World or Fazanadu. I'm just arguing that those are other games that we've seen take the same kind of approach for those, for better or worse. Clash of Demonhead's doing it its own way, and I think that's ultimately what we have to talk about here is the choose your own path nature, and whether you get lost or find what's necessary. There are areas that you don't have to go to, but they could make you stronger or collect more money to buy at the shops. There are some parts of the world that are gated behind specific power-ups that you might not know you need when you first get there, but then you have to go find them. Stage 17 has the you need the jetpack to go any further, so you might get there before you ever get the jetpack, and then you have to kind of piece together why you're not progressing. I think little things like that take this game, and that's why it's not just a platformer. It's not just a Super Mario Brothers Mega Man style game, because there is this style of fetch quests where you'll be told, oh, you need to get this thing, or you need to do this thing in order to progress. Things are gated off in a way that they aren't in traditional platformers.
Yeah, like there's an economy and inventory management and several different variations of upgrades. And I think just like that depth and having different not collectibles, but I guess currencies to keep track of, and you can get gold and you can sell it for money, and then you can then buy more stuff at the shop, and there's different ways to get to the shop. Like I think that all those different systems, as simple as they may be, make the game greater than the sum of its parts in that way.
Also, another part of, this could border RPG as well, but just the NPCs or characters that you meet that kind of give you the quest information. I'm thinking about Facia. I think that's how you would say it. She's the fairy character.
Sprite.
She leads you to Route Unknown, or Michael gives you like some story beats, and the Hermit eventually gives you the force powers. Like these characters also add some flavor that we really wouldn't see in like Mega Man games until like the X series, where you would start having cutscenes and having the explanation of what's going on in the world. In the first 6 games, to the best of my knowledge, I don't think they have those kinds of cutscenes where you talk to characters and get additional information or world building or power ups in that fashion.
I mean, it also has a date numbering system where it's 1990X. So there's also that Mega Man flourish.
Yeah, the 20XX is so close to 1990X.
The characters that you're meeting along the way, they're all kind of goofy. This isn't the worst translation ever, but the translation isn't perfect. I feel like when they say that there are like 7 governors of this mountain, like I think they just tried to say boss. So that adds a little bit of personality, but like that, what we were saying about, if I had to give like a spark notes for how I feel about this game, it's sort of like all of the higher level, the higher order designs, the stuff that like that inventory management that we talked about, the character design and the writing, and just when you zoom out enough, everything looks great as like a design doc, and like all those complaints that we had earlier in the show of just like how you move and how your hitbox manages, like those weren't perfect. So the characters and like that, the stuff that you wouldn't see in Mega Man until later, like those are all really, really well done. And whereas just the more base level stuff we had more complaints on.
And Sean, you're kind of getting into the plot there for a second, which I think is worth just giving a brief overview on, because as the engine of destruction, what is happening if they're saying you must stop mankind's extinction. You're an agent of Saber, Special Assault Brigade for real emergencies, which made me question, what are fake emergencies?
Real in like the 80s sense of like it's more important than most.
Right, like Knight Rider would also be a member of the Special Assault Brigade for real emergencies. Like he's one of those people that's contacted in a moment of real emergency.
Yeah, like a blizzard isn't a real emergency. Like that's an emergency for normal people. It's only when it comes down to like the threat of nuclear annihilation where he considers it an emergency.
And Professor Plum has been kidnapped, and Professor Plum is the creator of a doomsday bomb capable of destroying the world. So I guess you can guess why you need to rescue him on the journey.
Like, why is he a good guy that created the doomsday bomb? Are we getting into like the gray morality of geopolitics here? Like, was Professor Plum he was just a tool for the good guys, but the good guys decided that they needed a world-ending technology to stay ahead of the bad guys? How good could those good guys be? Why is Plum not under house arrest 24/7?
I see a lot of parallels to like 1950s, 60s, early nuclear warfare here with the, Professor Plum could have in another life, rather than being kidnapped, could have just went freely over to give the doomsday bomb to other people. Are we so sure he was kidnapped?
I don't know.
Yeah, I was unclear on that too. Like, did we have the doomsday bomb? And like, oh no, the bad guys got one too. Like, what's going on? But to be honest, for this whole story section, I'm kind of just listening because I had no idea what was going on. I don't know. Was all this in the manual? This stuff we were talking about, Mike? Like, I didn't get any of this from the game. I mean, some of it, like the doomsday thing and everything, and like the stuff that like. Not Michael. There was someone else that would talk to you too. That was like trying to steal your girlfriend. I guess it seemed like
he did steal your girlfriend. Yeah.
Oh, he did.
Yes.
Okay.
The one you were on vacation with, and you got an emergency code from.
Right, now that's important, Sean, because we didn't mention that. After you're told that you have to save Professor Plum, you're told that when you're on the beach. So that's that's a little bit of an interruption. But for Bang, he can do it. And Bang eventually on his journey meets Michael, who he thinks is his friend, but is actually possessed by a demon. So that's when some other, I thought this was pretty grounded in reality from a story standpoint for a moment. And then the demons started showing up. And, Sean, you got me thinking about the bosses versus governors thing. And I think that we should start calling bosses, like, even beyond that, presidents, dictators, like who's more important than the boss is just the guy who you report to at work. Like the governor has real power.
I thought that was a cool, like, unique. I mean, I'm sure it was a mistake, but like unique, like flavor of the lore in this game. Like, oh, the bad guys are like the the 7 evil governors or whatever. Like, it's just like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What's going on in this world? That's the like these are like the like people who you fight who have like powers and shit.
I don't know if there is any other media. Mike will probably tell us all later in the show, but if this is just a standalone story for this standalone game, they did have some backstory of there being like an ongoing war, but he was specifically on vacation from the war. Like, I guess he finished his tour of duty. And I don't know if like Demonhead Mountain is just where all the bad guys live, or if that's just another place that happens to be inhabited by bad guys that you were fighting in this war. But like there's stuff that you can assume that there's more going on here.
Right, because the bomb, the doomsday bomb, turns out to be technology from an alien race responsible for creating humanity 1,000 years ago. They Prometheused us on this shit.
Wait, only 1,000?
That's weird, right? What's the math
It's
on that?
1990X.
Right.
That implies at least another 990
I didn't think
years.
about that, yeah.
I don't know for sure where I'm getting this information from anymore, but to be honest, would that shock you?
It wouldn't shock me,
If
but
it was
also
true,
sounds
right.
a little like you just made that up.
So the only way to defuse the bomb is with the medallions that you've collected from the governors. There are no instructions, though, so Bang can only guess where each medallion is placed, and it's like it's an actual thing you have to do in the game. It's not just watch Bang try to put the medallions in place. You have to do that. The good news is that at least they lock in when you have them in the right spot, so you can just put one in each place and then just see if any of them lock, and then just so on and so forth, rotate through. But it's not great that there's some RNG there at the end.
It is RNG, like it's not like you don't get hints. Like
I believe it's RNG
or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. And if you don't do that, if you don't put the medallions in the correct order, you get the bad ending of the game where the bomb triggers. And it's pretty cool that we have a bad ending. We also had a bad ending in Dragon Warrior, which I called Dragon Quest earlier in the episode. They're the same game where you can join the dragon. That was pretty cool.
Oh, yeah.
Very memorable.
Very memorable. Yep, we both love it. And also, say that you do put the medallions into the bomb correctly and stop it. Then you get offered an apprenticeship by the hermit, but Bang will decline the apprenticeship, and he wants to make a game based on these adventures. Now that's pretty crazy. What an ending!
That's very meta.
wild.
Very
Bang
meta.
implies
And that's
that
what
he
we have
made
right
the
now.
game you're playing.
Yeah, it implies that like he's trying to tell you that, hey, this happened. Watch out when you go outside. Like, this is out there.
But why is it that you can't accept? Like, if that's the actual thing that happened, then why can't you actually accept it?
Because that's not what happened. He didn't accept. He made this game instead.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
But Sean, even if you could, right, then why would you ever even answer the phone at the beach, right? Just don't start the game at all. Like, just hang out on the beach with your girlfriend.
That's the only winning move is not to play.
Yes.
Right.
Most important plot point, though, and then I swear we'll talk a little bit about the RPG mechanics, like the shop and the force and stuff like that. The most important plot point is that for the North American version of Clash at Demonhead, they added a mustache to the shopkeeper.
I'm looking at him right now, and I cannot imagine him without a mustache.
It would be
I
crazy,
wouldn't even
right?
Bought this game in Japan if he didn't have a mustache.
That
Was
I
there
didn't
a thing?
know.
Like, yeah, I guess Japanese people are very clean shaven and everything, and they were like, oh, this game feels very Japanese. Like, better add a mustache.
I
for
don't
the
know. I've
Americans.
seen Japanese people with mustaches.
I'm trying to figure out why. Well, think about it.
But wait,
Why would
Sorry,
they add
this
the
is-
mustache?
maybe they just thought like Americans were they were more, there's a lot of cowboys in America, so like maybe they're like, oh, they love mustaches.
I just don't think that the late 80s, early 90s were like a very mustache centric time in American culture. So, yeah, I don't know. I thought it would be more like a goatee. That seems more this time.
They're dealing with 8 bits.
It's true.
But now you got me noticing that when you're looking at this glorious mustachioed sprite, there's a little. Is that you? There's like a little guy, like basically like sitting in his lap.
No,
It's like
that's
right
his
under
daughter.
under his
He
chin.
says, "Let me introduce you to my daughter." Is that you?
Like it's just this tiny little face down
You
there.
think it's like a
I've never noticed it.
ventriloquist version of you?
Yeah.
I want to buy this. All right, so since we're talking about the shop, might as well bring that up because it is a place that both you can go to, you can spend money on, and you can also buy at the shop a call to then call the shop wherever you are to then buy more of the shop.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how it works. You kind of, if you don't want to get in a hard position where you have to go all the way back to where like the shop always is, there is a shop call, and then when you use the shop call, the shop will just fall from the sky, and then you can do what you need to do on location. And basically you want to just make sure that the first transaction that you make when you call the shop is just buy the shop again. And then
Yeah, that's what I was doing too.
and then you'll also have the various power-up suits, get some food for health replenishment, all that fun stuff, you know.
Yeah, it's actually something that that helped me after, like I said, like my first pickup of this game. I was really not enjoying it, and but it was because I didn't really know what the heck I was doing. I'm sorry, I don't want to curse on the podcast, but I as I like kind of realized like, oh, you're not supposed to go to this part yet. You're not supposed to do this until you've bought like the scuba gear. Like when I was talking about how I kept dying in the water at the beginning, and it felt like I had like no agency at all to like get myself out of it. It was because I needed the scuba. Like I just should have read the manual. Is really the answer. And then there are like things to, there's things to help you jump higher. There's the jetpack, which I actually don't think I got to the part where you need a jetpack yet, but it definitely helps you.
Even when you
if
don't
there's some
need
things that
it.
would be otherwise.
Yeah, there are.
What's that?
Even when you don't need some of the items, they're still helpful.
Yeah. Like there was a boss I was having a real hard time on, and there's I forget what it's called, but it's like basically two medallions or whatever you want to call them, two orbs that fly around you and protect you from damage. And like it only lasts for so many hits or whatever, but like it made the difference. Like there's a lot of cool power-ups, and it feels like it's interesting because it's RPG-ish in that way, but it's not like a lot of these things are only locked behind how much money you have, not behind your progression. It's the monk power-ups that really are like more about progression. But like these other items, like you could buy them and use them pretty much whenever you
If
want.
I'm
except
not
for a few
mistaken,
that are locked.
there are a few items in the shop that he's like, oh, I haven't designed this yet, but you can buy it later. And I think that those are also locked behind progression.
Well, there are some. There are two that are question marks, and then there are some that are like after you've bought one. I know that they're out of stock or whatever, so you can't just buy a bunch of them or like buy them back to back. What you're saying also rings the bell too, though. But maybe in the video I'm watching right now, this person must be past that. But I do remember running into that when I was playing.
But them being limited time use items too, like your power ups, a lot of the guns you buy are just temporary. Once you run out of its ammo, you lose it. Limited time use means that you have to return to the shop, and so the real strategy for the shop is to always have the shop call. So you always basically need to spend the upfront. I don't know if it's like 2,000 or whatever.
2,000.
Yeah, you need to buy that first and then buy things. You can't like run out of money without it because the shop, going back to the shop, could be an awful lot of backtracking in specific situations. But the power ups could be really useful, and getting them on the fly is a lot handier or more positive gameplay experience for a lot of people. I could imagine some people who need specific power-ups and finding out they have to go back to the shop being a bit of a letdown.
One thing that I did like about the items and upgrades specifically is that yes, they run out of ammo in use, but you can also unequip them from the menu again and like save the ammo you still have and not like be like, oh, I just needed it for this one jump, and now when I need to do it again, like I'd have to go buy a new one. Like you can put it away.
Yeah. I was doing that even with like the scuba gear, which only loses its potency or whatever, its power as you swim underwater. But when I wasn't underwater, I would still unequip it, like, I don't know, for like immersion or something. It just felt right. Like I didn't want something to happen to it. I didn't want to damage it by like by getting hit by an enemy, even though that's not how it works at all. But it was nice, especially for those jumping boots.
When you buy a gun in RPGs for characters that can wield them, generally the gun doesn't run out though, right? You just buy a more powerful gun later on. Maybe I'm just thinking of very specific RPG experiences to me, but I did find it surprising at first that I was just buying the ability to use this thing 30 times rather than being like, oh, I'll just get a better gun later on. Like you kind of always default back to your base model.
I mean, I guess for the guns, you can think of it as you're buying 30 rounds of ammo for the guns. I feel like it makes less sense for like the boots. It's like, oh, these boots only have like 10 joints in them, and then you got to buy a new pair.
Yeah, well, they ripped open or something, right? The soles are gone. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, like if you're thinking about like in Final Fantasy VII and you get a new gun for Barret, like it's really just treating it as a ranged version of a sword. That's like a much more pure JRPG, whereas this is, it's got that whole hybrid thing going on.
Doesn't Breath of the Wild do something like that with all the weapons where like they break?
Yes.
So I'm actually pretty positive that Breath of the Wild directly ripped this game.
Right, there you go.
Yeah.
And you know what? While we're on the subject of that, because we'll never cover that game, I would just like to say that I don't understand why people hate that. It's crazy to me. That's the only way to play different with different weapons in those games. You would never use anything if your best stuff never broke.
Well, I get that, but again, going back to how people have been trained on RPGs, like that is part of permanent progression. And I don't think there are a lot of people that when you take permanent progression away from them, especially with gear, because I know you keep all your other like health upgrades and stamina and whatnot, but while I don't see it as that huge of an issue, I can understand the psychology behind it.
Yeah, I feel like it just depends to me on like what I expect to be getting into from the beginning. If I want a game where I'm really like if I pick up Breath of the Wild ever, which I plan on doing eventually, I'll go into it knowing like, okay, that's what this experience is like you're looking for your next weapon, like that's fine. I guess I can understand if like, because it's not been done in other Zelda games, right?
No.
Yeah, so like I guess I can understand if you're like, oh, I want to play the next Zelda game, and it's like it feels like they changed something fundamental to a Zelda fan. I feel like I'd like it because I'm going to go into it, like I said, expecting it and being like, yeah, this is what this game is. Let's see what it's all about.
I would argue though that game is fundamentally different from the other Zelda games anyway.
Right.
So like people who like Twilight Princess probably will still like Breath of the Wild for a totally different reason. It's not because it feels like Twilight Princess. Anyway, talking about Clash of Demonhead, back on it. Joe, you mentioned the powers that the Hermit will teach you. Both progress the game, but also act as like additions to the platforming sections. You can go micro-sized, and yeah, that's useful, I think, in like at stage 35 or something where there's actually a passageway where you have to turn micro to go through it, and that's kind of funny. It reminds me of in Super Mario, there's not the first game, but later on, they would add a mini power-up, too, that has that same thing. So Joe chalked that up to another thing that a Nintendo game stole from Clash of Demonhead.
Wow.
My point being that you could also just turn micro whenever, though, too. It's not like it's wait till you're standing in front of that, and then you'll turn micro. It's now an enhancement to the platforming stages as well.
I'd say that this is also
does it affect
a great Ant-Man game. Which I don't think we've ever gotten before.
Ant-Man, the movies, a lot of people think it's based on the comics. It's actually based on Clash of Demonhead on the NES.
I see.
But does your hitbox change when you're small? I didn't feel like it did, but I couldn't really tell. I didn't test it enough. Really? Okay, I guess I'm just still getting hit a lot. But...
I was going to say, I think it does as well, but to be honest, I don't know by how much, or now you're making me question if at all, but I would imagine, look, it's not an unpolished game. You got to think that they would they'd be able to make those kinds of adjustments.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's also not a perfectly polished game.
No, it's just polished. There's a bit of they could do some more and it would shine a little better, but it's polished. Another RPG trope that whole unwinnable boss fight against what's this guy's name? Guy
could Threepwood.
Yeah, whatever. No. I thought that was fun. Unwinnable boss fights. Sure, I wasn't expecting one.
I didn't get there. Sorry. Oh, you mean at the very beginning?
Yeah, at the very beginning. I was like, what do you mean you didn't get
sorry,
there?
I didn't even play this
But
game.
he like sort of does. He doesn't kill you. He's just like, oh, I'm done. Like I'm gonna.
Yeah. No, but you have to like take a certain amount of damage before he's like, I'm done with you.
Okay.
But you're still doing things. It's not like it's a cutscene where he just like lights you on fire or something.
Yeah, I like that. He's just like, I'm just gonna rough you up a little bit, and I'm gonna make fun of you, and I'm gonna tell you I'm a governor, and now you gotta come get me.
See, I think I would have liked more of that throughout the stages.
Yeah, but it's nice to make the governors feel intimidating right off the bat. Then throughout the stages, it's like, all right, now you gotta kill the guy. Like,
I think more just spontaneity. That was, that's something that like they show off at the beginning of the game, and it's not a groundbreaking feature. It's not even that impressive of a feature. I get it, Sean, but still, nevertheless, it's it's an interesting thing that's included in this game that is trying to do so much. There is a cool password that you can put in that starts you with max health points and all the items. And I didn't write down it because it was either too long or it not something you could say out loud, so I didn't bother with it. But
you were out of paper because of all the map drawing.
Right. But it's a translation in Japanese that says, "I remember the things the genius forgot," and maybe that's like you're playing as like a past version of Bang, or a future version.
I think that's actually just like a quote coined by the Victor Kai, right?
Right, Victor Kai.
But really, is that a quote from something?
Victor
is that like
Kai.
Did somebody say that? Or just Victor Kai, just while making this game?
I think he coined it, but I don't really know.
Who made this game, Victor Kai or Billy Big Bang Blitz?
Well, Victor Kai is the what is it, like the demon engine or whatever the heck he's called? Billy Big Bang?
No, well, yeah, Victor Kai is the actual developer.
I understand
of
that,
the game,
but the engine of
destruction.
Destruction.
Oh, yes, maybe that's who Victor Kai is, or Victor Kai built the engine of destruction, which is Billy the Big Bang Blitz, who then went on to make this game.
Because maybe Victor Kai is the one who did all this stuff, and then he just changed the name of himself in the game. Because in the end, they reveal that this all really happened.
I'm very confused now.
And if Victor Kai made this game, he must be the protagonist who it says went on to make this game.
Victor Kai is a longtime friend of the podcast, so we'll just get an answer from him, sooner or later, and we'll report back to everybody. Sean, sequels and spinoffs. Nothing.
Really?
Didn't happen. Yep. This is a like cult classic style game. I don't know if you could say classic even, but like it definitely has like a cult following to it. Apparently, the closest thing I could find to any form of additional media, you would think it would have got like one of those World of Power books, right? But instead they gave it to Bases Loaded 2 when they could have had such a rich story in the Clash of Demonhead. The closest media I could find for this is that the band in the Scott Pilgrim comic series and the movie is named The Clash of Demonhead. So obviously that comic series has like a ton of video game names all over it, but I just thought, gotta give you something. So that's what I got, in terms of like why they never made another one. I don't know. It's up to Victor. What does he want to do about it?
I did know that when I saw this on like the list of upcoming games of like that there is some cobweb in my brain that has heard this name before. I just didn't know it was going to be from a Michael Cera movie.
Yeah.
Clash of Demonhead does sound like something really cool, though. Like, you got to give it up to them. Props for a great title.
It is a great title.
And one other small note before we move on with the rest of the show. The thing of adding route numbers to the map, it was done, Joe. They did it on a ROM hacking thing that you can download if you want to play this game on an emulator, and it literally just adds numbers in, like, really, just black text next to each of the dots. And it makes sense when you look at the image. You kind of understand why they would have said, like, this is a lot that people don't necessarily need. Like, it looks really cluttered when you look at it, but it's, it's helpful.
I will say, though, that
Yeah.
even though we've been talking that it is medium polished, and we have said that we like the designs for the characters and some other things. This map looks like it was made in MS Paint. There is no,
Yeah.
it looks like there was no actual perspective used. It like, just that paint bucket.
Yeah, they didn't even make Demonhead look scary.
Yeah, and then like your sprite that moves around the map is like literally like a yellow smiley face. Like it's just a dot and then like a straight line for a mouth, not even a curve for a little smile.
Maybe it was the shopkeeper's daughter who designed this map.
Oh, I like that
Oh.
headcanon.
If you like that, Sean, you'll love what's coming next. It's something we do every episode, and it's called the Essential Games List. I think I'm going first these days, right? It's 2023. It's a new year. I speak first.
It's your rules,
Your
Mike.
year.
Wow. All right. We're going to need a little back and forth or something beforehand. That's a little strange. I didn't think about this beforehand. It's weird to hear me
No, we're
throw
not
to
talking.
the Essential Games
If you want to
List.
go first, you're going first.
All right. Well, look, there's a lot in this one. It mimics so many ideas we've seen executed well from games that are on the Essential Games List. It can be a bit of a tedious video game if you don't know what you're doing, but no more than, say, if you don't know what you're doing in Metroid. I find that game to be very tedious. So, I do think the actual combat isn't as tight as, to quote a game I've been saying all this episode, Mega Man. I don't feel like it's quite there. We described the levels as a little claustrophobic and the hitboxes being a little large. They might have been better off expanding the size of these stages, not necessarily the duration of the stages, just giving more freedom of movement. But, you got to respect the game's ability to be Mega Man, Mario, and, a Zelda 2 crossover. I don't know if it's completely worthy of being on the Essential Games List, but it gets a lot of respect for me, and I definitely think this is one of those ones that earns its cult status. It's kind of like, if you know, but I do think this is more of like the second rung of games on these things, where this would definitely fall into my play it category, because it really is for NES enthusiasts. I do think there are just some overall quality of life things that don't make this a complete package today. Joe?
Yeah, so like I said, I was very unfair to this game, I think, when I first played it. But I'd only played it for, not very long. I had still planned on playing more before the episode started. Luckily, before I picked it back up, our friend John B had some good tips and tricks. And once I kind of like applied that and like, I don't know, actually kind of paid more attention to like what I was supposed to do and like how this game is supposed to be played, I sort of did a 180. I really thought it was pretty ambitious and like largely succeeded in a lot of the ambition. It's definitely, I will not say that it is not a flawed game. I mean, it definitely has its flaws here and there, but it was pretty fun. Like the RPG element of it that kind of like helps you get past things, and it's kind of like, it's not as locked as other games like that. Like you kind of decide like, okay, I can use this here, this will help me. It feels like you have more agency in that, like, in where you use these power-ups and how they help you get past things and stuff. And for that, I love it. And I actually did come around to the gameplay, despite like a lot of those weird like movement and hitbox things we were talking about earlier. Once I kind of realized all the tools I had at my disposal, that felt like less of an issue to me. But yes, I am kind of on the same page. I feel like this is definitely a play it. I don't know exactly what I would say was missing. It's just not quite polished to the level as other Essential games, and I don't know. This might be one that, again, like I say this a lot now, but like maybe whenever we do the best of 1990, I'll revisit it and my eyes will be open, but I'm not there right now. So no, I'm not going to vote on the Essential Games list.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I think as you go up on the hierarchy of whether it's at the base level, like just how the character moves, as you go up to the grander designs of like, oh, how does the economy work? How do these the story interact with the gameplay, and what's the vibe like? As you go up from a more basic concept to a higher concept, the game gets better at each step. I do agree that the more moment to moment gameplay is what's hindering this. And I would also put this at the rung of play it, not essential. But if there was more, if it just felt better moment to moment, shooting the basic gun, because that's mostly what you're going to be doing, and it felt a little bit tighter in combat and with the platforming, I think this game would be essential. But it's what you're doing the most, so it just felt a little annoying at times. So I'm gonna keep it off as well.
All right, so it's 3 no's, but it's 3 reluctant no's. I've never seen that, for all 3 of us to be like sad that I didn't get there. But it's a game we knew nothing about too beforehand, so that tells you something about the quality of this. I think at a certain point you got to remember we played who knows how many NES games now. Like, we're getting pretty good at this, pretty good at playing NES games too. But we're starting to also understand the difference between like a good NES game and a great game overall. Maybe, I don't know. Spitballing. What do you think? What are you guys' thoughts on that? Are you getting better at playing? You're not getting better at playing NES games?
No,
even on your own scale.
Nah.
I think maybe I am on my own scale. I don't think I'm very good at NES games still, like as a whole. But I do think that I'm better at, like, on my own scale, deciding what I think is a great game. And what I used to be like, well, isn't it? You know, like, now I'm like, okay, I've seen a lot of these, and sometimes it's almost to my disadvantage when I'm trying to explain it, because I'm like, I don't know, I just didn't like it as like, I just feel like I've figured out my tastes a lot more for these old games.
Yeah, and I would just say I'm definitely not saying I'm good at NES games by any means. I think the people who listen to this show, the ones who grew up on the NES or play the NES, and a lot of them let us know that they've beat these games. Like, that's impressive stuff. I'm not necessarily like, I don't know, we've played over 250 NES games. I can't even say that I beat more than 40 of them, you know? Like, some of them are really easy beats. Other ones, good luck if you ever beat them. I don't know how many I'll beat by the end of this, but I definitely think I'm getting better at playing NES games, and so that's a pretty cool, useless skill that I developed.
I mean, I was just being a dick. Obviously, I think I have a better eye for these kinds of games now, because before, like, retro just wasn't my thing. But now, we've put down a foundation of knowledge and experience. So yes, I think we're getting better at this. I don't know.
Right. The funny thing is that I don't think it necessarily like translates back to your ability of NES games, and maybe that's what you were saying, Sean, is that I don't think I'd be any better at what are some of like the hardest NES games that we've played.
I took it more as getting better at criticizing an NES game.
Right. Like Ghosts and Goblins, I don't know if I'm going to get any further in that game than I did when we first played it, but I do think that I'd be more prepared for it now than ever, not just because I played it in the past, but because we're seeing the NES tropes and design decisions over and over again. Yeah, and we're going to continue to see them over and over again. Next week, we'll be seeing Demon Sword, not to be confused with Clash of Demonhead. 2 different kinds of demons in different places. One's at the top of a mountain, the other one's inside this sword. That's not true about either of these games. No. And it's not on the top of the mountain either. Right?
Oh.
Those are, yeah. So go figure. We do know things, though, on this podcast, and that is that we will talk to you next week. And if you want to talk to us even sooner, don't forget to join our Patreon for that Discord where you could have found out all those hot tips that John B was giving out all week that Joe mentioned. Think about it. Maybe you want to see what those tips were and be a little better at Clash of Demonhead. Everyone who joined the Patreon has the right, but not the obligation to join the Discord. You're not like forced. You don't get an automatic join receipt or something like that. So some people choose not to join us, and that's fine too, because at the end of the day, you also get the Nostalgia Bites episodes, and we've got one coming up very soon for All Night Nippon Super Mario Brothers, which is Super Mario Brothers with DJs, and the DJs come out of the warp pipes instead of the piranha plants, and I think the Goombas wear sunglasses. You want to hear about that. So join us there, or just join us next week for Demon Sword. No hard feelings.